Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El Rome.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blasted the Palestinian Authority for its relentless glorification of murder and violence. The ruling Fatah party of PA President Mahmoud Abbas not only failed to condemn coordinated attacks on June 16th that killed a 23-year-old Israeli border policewoman, but it instead hailed the three terrorists who carried out the mission as heroes. The PA created further outrage by denouncing the deaths of the assailants who were eliminated during their multi-pronged armed assault by Jerusalem security forces. Israel's premier said there is no limit to the extent of the Palestinians' lies and gall.
In related news, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu ordered the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the country's embassy in London to file complaints with the BBC over the British network's coverage of that terror attack. The story's headline read only, "3 Palestinians killed after deadly stabbing in Jerusalem." No mention was made that the men were terrorists who launched the deadly assault. The son and namesake of U.S. President Donald Trump also issued a scathing reproach against the BBC on Twitter. Donald Trump Jr. wrote, "You mean after they stabbed a female Israeli police officer to death, right?" He added that this is as close to being misleading as possible. After being publicly called out for biased reporting, BBC eventually acknowledged its headline misrepresented the nature of the attack, and the story was updated to provide a more accurate depiction of what had actually occurred.
Denmark has announced plans to re-examine all of its contributions to non-governmental organizations in the Palestinian Authority. Copenhagen's Foreign Minister, Anders Samuelsen, insisted that it is imperative to ensure that aid money from his nation is being used to advance human rights in the Palestinian territories in a positive manner and not for incitement or boycotting efforts against Israel. Samuelsen added that Denmark will not be authorizing any new grants for Palestinian organizations in the meantime, and that it's possible the Scandinavian nation will end its support of a number of NGOs in the PA upon completion of its review.
Hamas deliberately worked to prevent aid distribution in Gaza for the sake of political gain during its last conflict with Israel in 2014. That's the serious accusation now being leveled by the Secretary General of the Red Crescent Organization, who oversaw that humanitarian mission. According to Mohammed El-Falahi, Hamas terrorists in the Strip intentionally fired at Israeli planes from a field hospital where his team was working to purposefully draw retaliatory gunfire. He also charged the Islamist group directly targeted the humanitarian workers in shooting attacks and by the planting of landmines along their route home. The Secretary General added that this wicked betrayal was particularly hurtful since it resulted in Muslims fighting Muslims who are giving humanitarian aid to other Muslims.
In other regional news, Israeli security analysts reveal that Iran's recent attack on Islamist rebels in Syria was an unimpressive failure. 3 of the 7 ballistic missiles fell in Iraq, and only 1 managed to hit its intended target. The rogue Shiite republic claims at least 360 terrorists were killed. The action was taken in apparent retaliation for the attack on Tehran's parliament earlier this month. Iranian officials said the missiles were intended as a warning to the United States and Saudi Arabia, with the implied message that the Jewish state should also take notice. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is closely monitoring the latest developments, and he issued his own message to Iran saying, "Don't threaten Israel."
A senior Israeli physician who's been treating victims of the Syrian civil war said that he believes snipers are intentionally aiming at children's spinal cords. Dr. Yoav Hoffman of the Western Galilee Medical Center revealed that there's a disturbing pattern of gunshot wounds at the exact same location on the backs of his young patients. He says he was moved to tears after realizing that gunmen are inflicting maximum damage and pain to their victims while leaving the children either partially or fully paralyzed. Thousands of desperate Syrians have made their way to the border seeking medical help from the Jewish state, even though their country is officially in a state of war with Israel.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held talks with his counterparts from Greece and Cyprus to accelerate the 3 nations' natural gas deal. The ambitious project involves the development of the world's longest and deepest underwater pipeline that will stretch more than 1,250 miles when completed in the year 2025. Gas from Israel's vast offshore reserves will be channeled as part of the overall aim of helping Europe to diversify its energy supplies and transform the Eastern Mediterranean into a regional energy hub.
And you know, Yochanan, the Israeli leader, and his wife Sarah made the trip to Greece aboard a flight which became historic because the world's first female ultra-Orthodox pilot was at the helm of the chartered Boeing 737. Before taking off, the Netanyahus posed for several photographs with First Officer Nechama Spiegel Novak. The Jerusalem resident and mother of four officially signed on with Israel's national El Al carrier earlier this year after receiving flight training in the United States. New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft presided over the inauguration of Israel's first full-size football field at a Jerusalem sports complex named in his honor. 18 members of the Pro Football Hall of Fame also came to the Holy Land for the opening, including Joe Montana, Jim Brown, Roger Staubach, and Mike Singletary. The legendary NFL players were greeted by many local dignitaries while helping to showcase the American Football League in Israel by meeting with some of the 2,000 active players and young fans of the sport in the Jewish state. The week-long mission also featured stops at all the important historical and religious sites. Many of the accomplished athletes are Christians who described their visit to Israel as emotional and incredibly rewarding.
Write these words down, because they are the terms of the covenant I have made with you and with Israel.
Tens of thousands of Bible-believing Christians are learning the language of the Bible. Gain a deeper understanding of the Scripture. Discover the hidden meaning of the Bible that has been lost in translation for centuries. Our dedicated staff of teachers are centered in the heart of Jerusalem to help you learn the language that was spoken by our forefathers and prophets. Join the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies online course and learn the language of the Bible today. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. We're here on a beautiful sunny day on our rooftop studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Nathaniel Barak. He is professor at the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies. Nathaniel, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Tell our viewers a little bit about what is the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies.
Israel Institute of Biblical Studies is the leading and largest online school for Bible studies. We teach all kinds of courses related to biblical languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, and also courses dealing with the context of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, the Jewish background of the New Testament, exploring the biblical lens, and so forth, all in order to enable our students to get in touch from the comfort of their own home with the deep understanding of the Hebrew.
It's very interesting, you know, this is a new phenomenon. Christians who believe in the Bible all over the world are studying Hebrew. They're learning the language of their forefathers. Why do you think this is happening?
That's a very important question. In order to understand the message of the Bible, in order to understand the everlasting truths of the Bible, one has to understand the medium that the Bible uses. And learning the Bible is a multidisciplinary endeavor. It involves many areas of studies. It involves history, poetry, geography, and even sometimes climate. But above all, one has to understand the language of the Hebrew Bible. The language is by far the most important component on the way to understanding the Bible. I would even go as far as saying that without a deep understanding of the Hebrew, one cannot understand the Bible. It would be like learning about the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence without understanding English.
You know, prayer is a very important part of the lives of people who believe in the Bible. And originally people were learning Hebrew to study the Bible, but now Christians, Bible-believing Christians, are praying in Hebrew for the first time in 2,000 years. Why is this significant?
Oh, this is a very good question. It is very significant both as far as the practice of the prayer and the idea of prayer, because the practice of praying in Hebrew is connecting you to the Jewish roots and is making you part of this channel and conduit of your fathers, forefathers, Moses, Abraham, and even Jesus, who spoke Hebrew and Aramaic. Moreover, the concept of prayer in Hebrew is an amazing concept. The word tefillah is related to judgment. Pei lamed, lamed has to do with judgment, and it is introspective judgment. You judge yourself and you judge the actions of God in order to change the world. Like Jacob was fighting with the angel. Being an Israelite and praying is trying to change the world through this channel of prayer.
Yeah, it used to be that people who wanted to learn languages, it took them years. It was very hard to learn. But you've developed a system where you can basically sit anywhere with your laptop, with your iPhone, and learn in a very short period of time. How were you able to develop such a process that turns someone who doesn't know anything about Hebrew into a Hebrew speaker within 9 months?
It's an amazing question. Really, what we do is we let the students engage with the Hebrew very early on. We dedicate the first 2 weeks to introducing the Hebrew alphabet, and then the students are immersed in the holy water of biblical Hebrew, so to speak, and the professors make sure nobody drowns, right? And besides being a biblical Hebrew teacher and a Bible collector, I'm also a captain in the IDF. In the IDF, we have this motto, nobody is left behind. So we at the Israel Institute of Biblical Studies apply this motto not just to the battlefield, but also to the classroom.
Netanyahu, give us a concrete example of how learning the Bible in Hebrew is different from learning it in a different language.
I think the most basic and most intuitive answer would be related to the names in the Bible. All the names in the Hebrew Bible, starting from Genesis all the way to Chronicles, and even in the New Testament, can only be understood in Hebrew. Let's take, for example, the first two names of the Bible, Adam and Eve. So in English, they have no meaning, none whatsoever, but in Hebrew, they are so loaded with meaning. Adam, or Adam in Hebrew, is related to the word Adamah, earth or soil, because Adam was made of the soil, of the ground, of the earth. And it is also related to the word Dam, which is blood, because according to biblical law and biblical perception, the blood is the essence of human life. Same goes for Eve, or Chava. In English has no meaning, but in Hebrew it is ample with meaning. The meaning of Chava is actually threefold. First, it has to do with life. She whose profession is giving life. Secondly, it has to do with the word chivya, which means a snake. And thirdly, it has to do with expressing one's opinion by giving an advice. Now, all of these meanings are crucial to the understanding of the story of Adam and Eve. Without understanding those, one cannot understand the concept of the story. And it applies also to many common American names. Josh, for instance, or David, or Michael, Sarah, Mary, Susan, all of these are Hebrew names, and they can only be understood in the context of the Hebrew. Naturally, as we go deeper into the grammar of the Hebrew, we see more complex examples, such as the paradigm-shifting perception of time, which gives you a different understanding of what is time. And this is an amazing experience, and it can only be understood in the Hebrew.
Netanyahu, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I think that this is an amazing opportunity to learn Hebrew. This is an amazing way of doing that, and I've been personally blessed by seeing so many people of different countries, of different faiths, of different ages, learning and becoming Hebrew readers. Just last week I had a student celebrating his 84th birthday in class. The only downside of it was that we couldn't share the cake as it was online. And so you can get out of the comfort of your own home and according to your availability, very intimate and very understanding of the Hebrew Bible and of the Bible in general.
Thank you, Netanyahu, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Keren Hayesod.
Shalom and welcome to the Return to Zion with Keren Hayesod. I'm Eliezer Moody Sandberg, World Chairman of Keren Hayesod, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. This is the story of the biggest aliyah in Israel's history from the former Soviet Union. Be inspired by the stories of the prisoners of Zion, whose courage led to the crumbling of the Iron Curtain. Please help us to continue to bring the Jews of Russia back home to the Promised Land.
Since the beginning of the 20th century, supporters of Keren HaYesod spearheaded the efforts needed to establish the first independent Jewish state after 2,000 years of exile. For Jews across the world, Keren HaYesod helped forge a new age of hope, making the dream of 2 millennia come true. But at the same time, the Jews living in the former Soviet Union suffered immensely. Religious practice was suppressed, and Jewish national identity crushed. By the 1950s, under Stalin's cruel regime, countless persecuted Jews were executed or sent far away to the gulags. Russia's once thriving Jewish life was no more. But many refused to forget their heritage and God's covenant with the Jewish people. Secretly, they studied Hebrew and the Torah. They covertly practiced holiday celebrations. And above all, they dreamt of returning to the Jewish homeland, to Israel. Aware of the consequences, many still applied for exit visas. Viewed by the Soviet authorities as an act of treason, these brave individuals were dismissed from their jobs, harassed, and ostracized from society. By the 1970s, many leading Jewish activists had been sentenced to long periods in jail for fabricated offenses. But even suffering in the most appalling conditions, they continued to demand they be allowed to go free to Israel. Because of their refusal to give in, they became known globally as Refuseniks. Their determination inspired a mass international solidarity movement. Jews across the world, including the supporters of Keren HaYesod and their Christian friends, held mass demonstrations and lobbied global leaders. In the words of the Bible, they demanded, "Let my people go." Refuseniks such as Natan Sharansky became household names. Alongside the likes of Yuli Edelstein, Ida Nudel, and other prisoners of Zion, they became international symbols of human rights and Jewish freedom.
Successful demonstration in those days of Jews who wanted to go to Israel was 5-10 people standing for 5 minutes in the center of Moscow Square with the slogans, "Let us go to Israel." The more people know about demonstration, the more chance that KGB, secret police, will know. Then there will be no demonstration. And the punishment can be up to 5 years of exile. But the idea was that if at least one foreign journalist knows about this, and he will come and he will inform, we are arrested. In the evening it is broadcasted all over the world about our arrest. Next day, hundreds of thousands of Jews all over the world go on their demonstrations, demand from their government to act. And that's how we were organizing this struggle.
By the end of the 1980s, the pressure began to pay off. Sharansky became the first political prisoner released by Soviet Premier Gorbachev. Sharansky and his comrades were welcomed to Israel as heroes, bringing to life the prophecy of Zechariah, "I will return to Zion and dwell in Jerusalem." When Communist Russia collapsed in the early 1990s, over 1 million Jews followed these prisoners of Zion to Israel. With Keren HaYesod's help, they built flourishing lives in the home of their forefathers. Those who once languished in Russian jails became influential Israeli leaders. Sharansky served as a 4-time minister and deputy prime minister. After being imprisoned for 3 years in Siberia, Yuli Edelstein is now current Speaker of Israel's parliament. Ida Nudel remains a leading social activist and a powerful Israeli public voice. The legacy of the prisoners of Zion will truly continue to shine bright for many years to come. And yet, there's so much more work to be done to help bring more Jews from Russia back home to Israel. Keren HaYesod remains at the heart of this mission. Now is your chance to join us in supporting the next wave of Aliyah from Russia and be part of history in the making.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, call us at 1-800-505-1665 or visit our website at www.khisrael.org.
Founded in 1949, the UN Relief Works Agency, UNRWA, is the only organization in the world that works not to resolve a refugee crisis, but to perpetuate one. All other refugee situations in the world fall under the aegis of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, which is charged with resettling those refugees, reintegrating them into their new societies, and not passing down refugee status from generation to generation. UNRWA is totally different. UNRWA was created and exists for one refugee problem and one refugee problem alone, and that is the Palestinian refugee problem. Those Palestinian refugees were not reintegrated into Arab societies where the language was the same, the culture was the same. In most cases, the religion was the same. They were not integrated. They were kept in refugee camps in order to perpetuate a conflict with Israel. Israel, which integrated and absorbed Jewish refugees from 70 different nations, including nearly 1 million Jewish refugees from the former Soviet Union, knows how to integrate refugees. But the UN works to achieve just the opposite goal, to perpetuate the crisis, to perpetuate the conflict. And UNRWA, alone among any refugee organization in the world, passes down refugee status from generation to generation. You could be the great-great-grandson or granddaughter of a Palestinian refugee from 1948, living in Lebanon, living in Syria, living in Jordan, and you'll still be considered by the UN as a refugee. American taxpayers pay 30.5% of UNRWA's budget. And American taxpayers should know that when you go to pay your taxes, you are helping to perpetuate a conflict and a crisis that has cost thousands of lives, has destabilized the Middle East, has endangered the state of Israel, and ultimately acted against the fundamental interests of the United States.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
גדלתי בבית עם 7 אחים ואחיות. אני לא זוכרת שהיה לנו כל כך כסף, אבל אני כן זוכרת שהיינו יחד תמיד, כמשפחה. כשהייתי בת 5 הכל השתנה. המשפחה שלי נקרעה, ההורים שלי התגרשו, שניהם התחתנו מחדש והקימו משפחות אחרות. לא היה מקום לי או לאחים שלי. ההורים שלי זנחו אותנו. האחים שלי פוזרו במשפחות אומנה, גם אני הייתי בהתחלה במשפחה אומנה, ואחר כך העבירו אותי לפנימיה. טיפלו בי יפה, אבל הם לא הכינו אותי לעתיד. איך להיות בוגרת. ברגע שהגעתי לגיל 18, עזבתי את הפנימיה ללא כסף, ללא אוכל, ללא עבודה. מבלי בכלל להבין איך העולם פועל. מהר מאוד הגעתי לרחובות. אני זוכרת, לפעמים היה לי רק חצי סנדוויץ' לאכול במהלך היום. הייתי בתת תזונה וגם רעבה. לפעמים ישנתי על ספסלים, לפעמים ישנתי במקלט ומדרגות של בניינים. לפעמים כל הערב הייתי הולכת ומבלה ככה את הלילה, מפחדת לישון שינה עמוקה כי פשוט פחדתי שמשהו עלול לקרות לי. עברו כבר כמה שנים שלא ראיתי את אמא. החלטתי לעשות לה שיחת גובניה. אמרתי לה, אמא, מה קורה? אני ברחוב, אין לי לאן ללכת. אין לי אוכל, אני ממש מפחדת. אני יכולה לבוא לבית שלך, וכל מה שאני זוכרת זה שהיא פשוט נתקעה את הקו. נתקע. אפילו בתוך הקשיים האלה, אני די קיוויתי שאמא שלי תתקשר בחזרה. אולי תשנה את הדעה שלה, שהיא תראה אותי, שמשהו יגיע אליה. בסופו של דבר הגעתי לבית חולים כי הייתי חלשה מזה שלא אכלתי. כשהייתי שם, אחות נתנה לי מספר טלפון של עובדת סוציאלית בשם איריס. התקשרתי אליה. אספה אותי. בדירה של הבנות לא היה מקום. אז את יודעת מה היא עשתה? פשוט לקחה אותי לבית שלה. ילדה זרה שאפילו לא הכירה. החיים החדשים שלי התחילו באותו הרגע. היא התחילה להדריך אותי ביחס לחיים, דבר אחרי דבר, איך להסתדר בעולם, איך לנהל חשבון בנק, תזונה, איך לבשל, איך לעבוד, באיזה דברים אני טובה, הכל. איריס פשוט הפכה להיות כמו אמא בשבילי, הצילה את החיים שלי. היום אני אוהבת לעבוד עם ילדים. אני מרגישה שכשאני עובדת עם ילדים, אני עושה משהו חשוב. זה גם מרפא אותי. יום אחד הייתי רוצה לפתוח עמותה משלי, שתעזור לילדים אחרים, שנמצאים באותם המצבים בהם אני הייתי. המלגה שקיבלתי מהשגרירות הנוצרית, ומזה שהבנתי שאנשים מסביב לעולם מאמינים ותומכים בי, אני יודעת שאשיג את החלום שלי. כי התקווה והאמונה שנשארה בי במהלך הילדות שלי ובזמן בוגרתי ברחובות, עדיין קיימת בי היום.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Feiner reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.